All right. So now we're not dealing. Do these two secants hit each other inside, outside? Is there a tangent? No, we're not doing that in 9-8. Basically, all we're doing is I'm giving you equations. This is if you had to actually go and graph the circles. I have done that in the past. Actually had people graph them, but it is somewhat painful to see their circles when they end up looking like footballs. So we will forego the graphing unless you really want to try and impress me with your circle. But what we can do is find the center and the radius. For example, and you don't have to write this down, just watch. Let's say we had this and I told you the center was over there and there was a particular radius. Do you agree that you could then graph that circle on an XY axis? If I told you where the center was and how big the radius was supposed to be, correct? And again, the reason I'm saying I'm funny is people sit there, they mark that point, they mark that point, that point, that point, and then their circle looks something like that. All right, and that's why I don't have you graph them anymore because, well, it's somewhat painful. So, those of you that are in Algebra 2, I don't know how some of that stuff is taught because I don't have that anymore, but I will tell you whenever something is inside parentheses squared, it's going to be the opposite of what you think. That's just the way it works. So to find the center, well, to find the x value of the center, very suspiciously you go and find the x. And then you look at that number that's sitting right there. And I just told you, you agree it's a -5, correct? But it is inside parentheses squared. So I just told you it's the opposite of what you think. You would think it would just be -5, correct? The x value of the center, it's not. It's +5. The reason is, do you agree if I put +5 in place of x that it would turn it back to 0? That's why. Okay, so here's the y value. So what y value can I put in there that basically makes this go back to 0? Well, -3. But most people just say, look at that, it's inside parentheses squared, and just take the opposite. Does that also work? Yes. So guess what? 5, -3 is the center of where you would put that circle. All right? So basically, this is x squared, agreed? This is basically y squared. This is r squared sitting right there. So that is the radius squared sitting on the end. So if I ask you for the radius, is the radius in this problem 25? No, radius squared is 25. So if you want to see the algebra, radius squared is 25, so how am I going to get just the radius? Square root, or as many of you do call it, Hausifat. Now, really, for radius, positive and negative does kind of make sense because you go to the right, you go to the left, everything, but we'll just say radius is just 5. That's it. Pretty much what you got to do. I told you that wasn't that bad, right? No tangents, no secants, no angles. Do that. Now, over here, the x value of the center. Now, be careful. Does this mean that I'm always going to put x first? No. Could I switch the complete location of these two? Yeah, but to find the x value, you find the x. Well, there it is right there. So what x value is going to make this happen? A -2. Then you find y. There it is. What y value is going to make that get back to 0? A +4. Is the radius 16? No, it is not. It is the square root of that, correct? Which happens to be a nice number, which is 4. Well, this isn't very hard now, is it? But look at letter C. What is different about... Yeah, the x, or the y, excuse me, does not have parentheses. Well, we can do the x, right? The x is right there. What value is going to make that -7? Yeah, there's no parentheses with the y. It is not 1. Alex has it. It is 0. Let me show you why. Because I could write it like this. Y plus 0 squared is the exact same thing as y squared. Agreed? Is y plus 1 squared the same as just y squared? No, it's not. And so if it ever is missing those parentheses, you know that particular value is just 0. Are we going to put positive or -0? No, because there is no such thing. Now, woo, what do you do here? Well, the radius, well, depending on the directions, if it says just find the radius, would it be okay to just say it's the square root of 7? Yeah. If it says to round to the nearest tenth, is that okay? No. So you have to read the directions and find out what it wants. If it wants you to, well, then you go ahead and you figure that out. Well, we know it's got to be less than 3. We know it's got to be more than 2. So if we go to the nearest tenth, 2.6, just 6. Okay. So any questions? Okay, on letter D, solve it now, please. Center and radius is what I would like. All right, let's see how I did here. Heather, can you please give me the radius? Oh yeah, I threw off on the directions there. It is 16. I was seeing if everybody's paying attention. All right. So Ian, can you give me the y value of the center? Very good, negative 18. Way to pay attention. All right. The x value, 0. Hey, is that possible though? How's that 0 work? Well, that just means when you go to your x, y axis, it's 0, negative 18, way down here somewhere. And then you put a circle in. All right, and I'll do the best I can. There you go. Not too bad. Yes. Okay, the question is, what if I kind of try and trick you? And for example, and you never know, I may try and do that, correct? Let's go back to this problem right here. I could give you the problem this way. Well, we'll really switch it up here. Is that in the order that we're used to seeing? No, it should go x squared, y squared, and then the number is the normal way you would see that. And so what I would do is get it in the right order first. Right? Is this okay with where it's at? Is that about where I want that? Yeah. How about that negative 16? Is that where I want that? No, so add that 16 over to the other side, correct? And so basically there would be a plus 16 sitting over here instead, right? But then the other problem is that's not where I want it either, so just add that entire thing over to here, because it does have to be plus in between. Okay, that right there has to be plus. If it is something else, it is not a circle. For example, if it is minus, it is not a circle. Okay, yes. You could. What I would do is try and avoid any negatives in those types of problems out front. The question was trying to subtract it over. I see exactly what you're talking about. As long as you took care of all the negatives, it would be fine. But it would look tricky because, like I said, it does have to be plus in between to be a circle. Okay. Anything else? Well, what if I kind of switch things up on here? And I give you the center, and I give you some information, and I say, give me the equation. Well, so I'm just switching things up. And so, well, let's face it. We know it's going to be something, an x here squared, right? What did I say had to be in between? A plus. And you know there's going to be some y here and a square, and then equal something, right? Don't we know that's pretty much what it's going to look like? And if you do them all the same way, it should probably save you from making those simple mistakes. And so you got to think backwards a little bit. So the center is supposed to be a positive 4. So then what has to go in those parentheses? Yeah, a negative 4, right? And then y has to be a negative 5, and so we're going to put plus 5. Now this is the one that I get a lot of people on. They tell me to put 4 on the right side of that equal sign. Okay, but there's a 2 there. How can the answer be 1? Well, yeah, the diameter is 2, which means the radius itself is 1. And what you have to do is not put just radius over here, but radius squared. So if I square this side, then I have to square that side, and well, 1 squared just happens to be 1. Okay? So is it always going to match up with just what the radius is? No, that's the one case where it will. Obviously, if the radius was actually 2, then you would put a 4 over there. That's how you would do it. Okay? Okay, so the radius is the square root of 13, and the center is the origin. So where is the origin? What's 0, 0? All right, so why don't you go ahead and try and do that one. Again, origin 0, 0, the radius is the square root of 13. That's not as scary as one might think. a lot of possible answers to this one, or I guess I could say a lot of answers I would accept. Once again, some people like to do it this way every time. That way they just get the setup. You don't have to necessarily do it this way every time, depending on if there's a 0 or not, and this one happens to have 2 of them. So, but again, some people like to do this because they really don't want to forget that plus. It's really important. So you could say x plus 0. You could even say x minus 0 if you wanted to. That's acceptable. And over here you could say y plus 0 or even y minus 0. That's also fine. And then over here, well, if the radius equals the square root of 13, if I square this side and square that side, what number really goes over to the right side of the equal sign is a 13. Because this houseifies right there. It just becomes 13. That right there is an acceptable answer. That is not a minus right there. That is me highlighting the plus sign. It is okay to just have that as well. A very acceptable answer. And does everybody understand why both are acceptable and why it's just a 13 on the right side? Because if you take the square root of 13 and square it, it is 13. Those two things cancel each other out. Translated, that just means moved. 6 units right and 3 units down from the origin, and the diameter is 10. Well, if I moved it 6 units to the right and 3 units down, well, where does that really end up? Well, if you're sitting here at the origin, and you move 6 units to the right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, now you're sitting right there, and then you also go 3 units down, well, now you're sitting right there as the center, correct? Otherwise known as 6 comma negative 3 is your center. Okay? And then really your radius is, careful, 5. Well, now that you know those two things, basically I just showed you another way they could give you that information. Now that you know that, well, this really isn't that hard at all. X minus 6. What should be the next thing I write? A plus sign. It has to be plus. Okay, y plus 3, very good, equals 25. Now I have made a mistake on purpose to see if you can notice what is incorrect about my answer. Yeah, I have to have a squared up there. If I don't have a squared up there, it's not a circle anymore. Right? You have to have those there. So do you think if you forget those, is that going to be okay? No, because you don't have a circle anymore. Okay. Any questions how I found the center or the radius in that problem? Or why it's a 25 over there? No? Ooh, this one's tricky. It's translated 2 units to the right and 1 unit down from 1 comma 5, so it's not the origin this time. And the diameter is 6 square root of 5. Well, this one looks a little tricky. So if we start at 1 comma 5, we would be right there, agreed?